On August 12, 2015, Tianjin, China, a fire broke out at the port area. Firefighters rushed onto the scene, but blissfully unaware that they would be soon dealing with one of the worst disasters in recent Chinese history. In just minutes, the fire evolved into an uncontrollable blaze, but the worst had yet to come. Just after 30 minutes, two massive explosions were triggered. It was so massive, it essentially liquidated all the firefighters who were inside. All buildings within 150-meter radius were immediately destroyed. It created shockwaves that could be felt miles away. 6 major fires were started, which took another 40 hours to clear. It was even photographed by a Japanese weather satellite in space. Even though this overlooked disaster was 20 times smaller than the well-known Lebanon explosion, the death tolls were similar due to the unfortunate timing of the firefighters. The incident resulted in 165 deaths and 8 missing, including the loss of 100 firefighters, one of the worst industrial accidents in modern-day China. Initially, heavy media censorship and limited coverage from the Western world had shrouded the entire incident in mystery. But as a decade has passed, we can finally look through the official reports and review the true story behind the disaster, which is of course no short of corruption and greed. This is the Tianjin Explosion. Please help us out by subscribing. Tianjin, China, located 137 kilometers from Beijing, is a major coastal metropolis acting as a key maritime gateway and also serves as a gigantic satellite hub within the Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region. Back in the 1980s, the ruling Communist Party pushed out economic reforms and prioritized several coastal cities to open up for foreign investment called special economic zones. In these zones, market-driven policies like tax incentives will be exclusively implemented to attract foreign investment. Tianjin was the 7th city, the only northern city to be included to this privileged program. In combination with its proximity to the Chinese capital, the policy greatly stimulated the local economy and boosted the activities for the Tianjin port, which quickly grew into the largest in northern China. Many logistic companies sprung up to capitalize on the demand. One of such is the company Tianjin Dongjiang Port Binhai International Logistics, established in 2011. In 2013, the company began the expansion of a major warehouse located in the Binhai new area of Tianjin Port, bounded by the 111 National Highway and Yueji roads to the east, and another logistics company to the west. The facility covered a total area of 46,000 square meters, including nearly 6,000 square meters of a special storage area which stored goods that are still pending custom clearance. This area was positioned in the northwestern section of the site. Around the same time, the company obtained a general license from the Tianjin Port Administration. However, this certificate only authorized the company to deal with general cargo and explicitly excluded any hazardous goods. Despite this, Binhai carried on with the illegal construction and began operations on the hazardous goods anyways. One of the company's director, Yue, had much experience in Chinese logistics, was well aware of the complex and lengthy procedures required to obtain an actual legal license to handle hazardous goods. To kindly accelerate the process and get the company running as soon as possible, he quickly used a nitrate called bribery. He provided cash payments, arranged lavish dinners and golf outings with senior government officials, and acquired 5 special approvals exclusively for the company, a practice that was unprecedented by then. At the same time, another director, Dong, whose father was a former police chief of Tianjin Port Public Security Bureau, he used his father's connections to make sure that Binhai could continue to operate illegally with minimal interference from the police, while the company is going through the lengthy process of obtaining the much-needed license. Throughout 2013, the company acquired several temporary licenses for warehouse operations. However, the licenses either didn't cover hazardous goods or just limited the scope to delivery operations only. Yet Binhai had intended to ignore these restrictions from the very beginning. It was reported that they had already begun to store up illegal materials since June 2013. To add fuel to the fire, all of the temporary license expired, but Binhai didn't even bother renewing them for a total of 4 months. Even though the company did acquire a trial license to handle the hazardous goods later in May, They also didn't renew them and had stored the goods illegally for another 11 months. It was until June 2015 that the company finally obtained the official license to operate and store dangerous cargo within the port. Yet the site had already been operating semi-illegally for 2 whole years at this point, which greatly exposed a massive oversight from the port authorities. But over the years, the company had already built up a massive storage of hazardous materials. By the time the accident occurred, the facility had already contained 7 categories of dangerous goods with a total of 11,000 metric tons. Along the materials were some of the most volatile and toxic industrial chemicals, including 700 tons of sodium cyanide and 200 tons of nitrocellulose, substances with high risk of fire, explosion and poisoning. There were also 800 tons of ammonium nitrate stored up to the day of the explosion, even though Tianjin authorities strictly prohibit storage and the compound must be immediately transferred away. This white crystalline salt is primarily used as a high nitrogen fertilizer and in industrial explosives. It's a strong classified oxidizing agent. It can trigger severe accidental explosions if exposed to high temperatures, making it a significant hazardous substance in storage and transport, as seen in the Lebanon explosion in 2020. Either way, the company had gradually built up hazardous materials over the years, with monthly cargo turnover reached about 60,000 tons, more than 40 times the approved amount of 5,000 tons. Its inventory levels also far exceeded the design limits for safe storage, with chemicals like potassium nitrate reaching over 53 and 42 times the design capacity respectively. With such a massive inventory, the hazardous cargo was densely packed in a small space like a tuna can. Containers with incompatible chemicals were placed next to each other, well beyond the safety limit. To make matters worse, the company basically had zero safety precautions. They outsourced to cheap subcontractors to handle the cargo without any in-house safety supervisors. The workers' safety knowledge was limited to general stuff like no smoking, but was totally ignorant about the other critical measures like segregation of incompatible chemicals. They used ordinary forklifts that basically had no explosive-proof design and even recklessly handled the hazardous cargo. It was a ticking time bomb at this stage. The company bypassed planning controls and obtained approvals through corruption. Safety precaution in the site was basically non-existent, setting the stage for one of the worst, deadliest industrial disasters in modern China. One tiny spark is all it would take for a catastrophic disaster to occur, which unfortunately did happen barely 2 months after they received the official permit. In August 12, 2015, Tianjin was in the middle of a blazing summer. The temperature was as high as 36 degrees. The temperature inside Binhai's warehouse was even higher at 65 degrees. Inside one of the containers stored 33 tons of nitrocellulose. This highly dangerous material is used for various purposes, including low-order explosives for mining. It has poor chemical stability. Even at room temperature, it slowly decomposes and releases heat. If this heat cannot dissipate quickly, the material's temperature would increase and combust. To circumvent this, nitrocellulose is typically kept wet with ethanol or water as a stabilizing agent. In the case of Binhai, the supplier mixed nitrocellulose with ethanol pulp, and workers handpicked the substances into plastic bags. However, these bags were not sealed properly but were simply tied with string. Once arrived at the warehouse, workers poorly handled the bags during unloading, loosening the bags, thus exposing the stabilizing agent ethanol to high temperatures. As such, it quickly evaporated within 2 hours. Without the stabilizing agent, nitrocellulose quickly built up heat. Inside the tight containers, the pressure and temperature climbed sharply and reached a turning point. At 10:50 p.m., the substance finally ignited. It ruptured, scattering burning nitrocellulose across the ground. It fed the flames and turned what began as a small local fire into a large open blaze covering a wide area of the storage yard. Firefighters quickly arrived on the scene within 10 minutes of the fire, but containers blocked access roads and prevented fire trucks from approaching. At that time, the warehouse workers had no idea what caused the fire. With half of the warehouse full of flammable materials, it's understandably difficult to pinpoint which one was the root cause, not that it really matters. To contain the fire, firefighters deployed water cannons. However, as the fire spread, it reached other containers holding additional flammable and reactive chemicals such as sodium sulfide and formic acid. These chemicals ignited one after another, intensifying the blaze, and soon it was out of control. By 11:10 p.m, the firefighters raised the alarm and requested reinforcements from headquarters. Within the next 20 minutes, 3 battalions and 200 firefighters had been mobilized. However, these firefighters were blissfully unaware of the dangers that lie ahead. 11:34 p.m, the fire soon spread towards the containers of ammonium nitrate. Similar to the Lebanon disaster, the material quickly broke down and a massive explosion erupted with a scale of around 15 tons TNT. Around 20 meters northwest of the blast site, there were even more containers packed with other highly reactive and flammable materials. The chemicals were already overheating and triggered a far more violent secondary explosion 31 seconds after the initial blast. The resulting fireballs reached hundreds of meters in height. Shockwaves could be felt throughout the city. The blast was equivalent to 430 tons of TNT. The firefighters inside the warehouse stood no chance at all. The enormous release of energy was registered as a magnitude 2.9 earthquake. 8 more explosions were recorded throughout the catastrophe. It took an additional 40 hours to put out the resulting fires. After the fires were out, it revealed the true scale of the incident. From satellite image, we can see extensive destruction in and around the warehouse compound. A large crater, nearly 100 meters wide and 3 meters deep, was created at the heart of the blast site. The buildings of 7 more surrounding logistics companies were totally destroyed. Large amounts of container crates were thrown out by the forces of the explosions. Apartment blocks miles away from the site also sustained shattered glass and damage to ceilings, with 17,000 units being affected. In total, 3,000 buildings, 12,000 cars, and 7,000 containers were damaged, causing 9 billion in damages. The government of Tianjin had to deploy 16,000 personnel and nearly an entire month to clean up the mess. After the explosion, strong chemical pollution was evident throughout the city. Thousands of dead fish also washed up on the banks 6 kilometers from the explosion site 2 weeks later, fueling fears of water contamination. The official amount of casualties for the Tianjin explosion was severe. 173 people died, including 8 missing. A majority of the deaths were servicemen and firefighters. Nearly 800 people were also injured. It was the deadliest incident for Chinese firefighters since the founding of the PRC. 1 year after the explosion, various courts in China handed jail sentence to 49 government officials and warehouse executives for the involvement in the disaster. The chairman Yu, who bribed government officials, was sentenced to death with 2 years of suspension. Tianjin was not a freak accident. It was a ticking time bomb that had been brewing for 2 years. Greed and corruption led to the tragic loss of brave firefighters who ran towards the flames. Nowadays, the site has been redeveloped into the Haigang Park as a constant reminder of the lesson learned from this tragic accident. Thank you so much for watching. Please help the channel out by subscribing. Thank you.